In the heart of our family trust restoration, I met my former friend and forbidden flame. Our eyes collided with a surge of raw, unspoken conflict and a taste of closure that left my pulse racing. In that charged moment, I realized that our desperate, healing partnership might just be the spark to destroy everything we once held sacred. Could reconciliation be our undoing? Chapter 1. Homecoming and Hesitations. The journey back to her childhood home was anything but welcoming. As Lena drove down the familiar gravel driveway, every turn of the road unspooled vivid memories of laughter, secrets, and even bitter tears. It was as though every stone and tree was a witness to a past too tender to forget. The faded sign by the gate, weathered by time, seemed to murmur promises of days gone by, a bittersweet reminder of both love and loss. Inside the house, the ornate hallway lined with old photographs and family mementos whispered quiet tales of better times, each frame echoing a life rich with both joy and regret. Lena's fingers trembled slightly as she traced the outline of a photo featuring a younger version of herself, smiling unburdened in a meadow of wildflowers. The reunion was meant to restore the family trust, a mosaic of efforts to piece back together what had been fractured over years of misunderstandings and silent grievances. But as the door closed quietly behind her, the weight of unresolved pasts and hesitations pressed deeply upon her heart. It wasn't long before the living room began to fill with the murmurs of relatives, each conversation laced with both hope and unspoken history. The central theme of the evening was restoration, a recommitment to the long-lost trust that once united them all. Family members mixed in their polite exchanges, avoiding the raw undercurrents of old arguments, but the air itself was thick with tension. Lena felt the pull of duty and nostalgia, caught between the desire to heal old wounds and the fear of unearthing further pain. In the midst of the welcoming chaos, a familiar voice sliced through Lena's inner storm. "Lena, is that really you?" It was Matthew, her former friend and once, so long ago, the keeper of her heart. The name stirred a cascade of long-suppressed emotions. The man standing before her bore the same gentle smile, though his eyes now held the complexity born of past hurts, and time passing too quickly. There was no dramatic reunion, no elaborate demonstration of rekindled passion, only a quiet, weighted acknowledgement that spoke volumes of the history they shared. For a moment, the past and present both converged in a single, charged heartbeat. "Yes, it's me," she replied, her voice lower than she intended. As they embraced, the reunion was gentle, a cautious melding of familiarity and the unrealized notion of reconciliation. The warmth of his arms brought back memories long hidden beneath the layers of their shared pain. Somewhere between the slow beat of the clattering teacups and soft conversations, a wistful silence enveloped them. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again," Matthew murmured, his eyes searching hers for answers. It was not merely a greeting. It was an invocation of the unspoken questions that had lingered through the years. Lena found herself caught in the rapid interplay of hope and uncertainty. She hesitated, feeling the pull of his presence like an old melody stirring a familiar ache. "I needed to come back to understand. Maybe to be understood," she admitted quietly, the confession carrying the weight of years of introspection. Their conversation was punctuated by fragments of memories, their shared secrets, the incidents neither could fully forgive, and a mutual longing for a time when trust and vulnerability were effortless. Yet every word, every glance, left behind a trace of unresolved conflict that threatened to shatter the fragile peace of the evening. As the night deepened, small groups formed to discuss the family trust restoration plan. Lena's eyes, however, remained fixed on Matthew. In isolated moments between laughter and casual remarks, their gazes locked, each silent exchange layered with both comfort and an unspoken apology that transcended simple words. The riot of conflicting emotions within her was palpable. Each beat of her heart echoed with a reminiscence of a love unmarred by betrayal yet haunted by the specters of misunderstanding. Outside, the wind carried a hint of autumn's chill, hinting that nothing ever truly stayed the same. Just as the seasons inevitably change, Lena felt an inexorable pull towards a future where reconciliation might be possible. Every laugh, every shared reminiscence in the room, echoed with the promise of rebuilding what had been fractured. The gathering was not merely a reunion, but a delicate dance between rebuilding family ties and facing the long shadows of a turbulent past. As the evening wound down, Lena found herself alone in one of the quieter corridors of the old house. The gentle hum of distant conversations and the soft echo of footsteps filled the silence. In that serene solitude, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, a fleeting thought of what might have been. Her mind whirled with questions. Could a homecoming mend the cracks left by years of neglect? Might the heart, once wounded so deeply, find solace again in familiar arms? The chapter of her return closed with the image of her reflection in an antique mirror. There, layered in the pale light of nostalgia and hope, was a face that bore its scars proudly, a face ready to confront the unresolved tensions and embrace the bittersweet journey ahead. The story of homecoming and hesitations was just beginning, and every quiet moment promised that the outcome was still unwritten. What, then, would tomorrow bring? Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. The heavy wooden door closed behind her with a soft click, yet it could not seal away the memories that clung to the air like a persistent mist. In the dim light of an aging family parlor, the protagonist found herself face to face with the person whose absence had created an unfillable void, and whose return stirred a storm of unresolved emotions. The atmosphere was thick with the echoes of laughter, and secrets long kept hidden, and even the slightest murmur from the old portraits seemed to underscore the gravity of the moment. Seated near a small table in the corner, the former friend, once a cherished confidant, studied her with eyes that knew of betrayals past and hopeful forgiveness yet to come. "It's strange," he began softly, his voice quivering with both uncertainty and a searching curiosity. "How one lost trust can echo so loudly in every quiet moment." She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the worn patterns of the rug beneath her feet. Her words, when they came, were measured and raw. "You never really left that day. The day everything changed. I never stopped asking myself if it was a mistake to believe in you." A long, heavy pause fell between them, punctuated only by the distant murmur of family members moving about, their footsteps and soft voices a constant reminder of shared history and shared wounds. It was as if the very house was a witness to their silent recriminations. In a quieter side room, a relative's soft conversation hinted at old regrets. "I remember when you two would laugh together like nothing else mattered," one voice said, laced with sorrow. Another replied, "Now it seems those memories serve both as a balm and a blade, cutting deep even as they soothe." Their words, though indirectly spoken, resonated with the underlying truth of fractured bonds and lingering hopes. The former friend leaned forward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Do you remember that summer night, the one we promised nothing would ever break us apart? I believed in that promise, until misunderstandings multiplied, and the silence stretched too far." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the sheer weight of unspoken apologies and assumptions filled the space between them. "I remembered," she admitted softly. "I remembered feeling abandoned even when you were still there, lost in a web of unvoiced anger and misinterpreted words. Our past wasn't a single event, but a series of moments, each one echoing in the next, until every trust you once earned was obscured by the shadows of my doubts." Their conversation, intimate and laden with painful honesty, seemed to peel back layers of old wounds. Every word was an invitation to face a painful truth, and each pause was a silent acknowledgement of the hurt that had evolved over time. The tension in the room became palpable, a living entity that bound their hearts in both sorrow and yearning. The family, though not directly intervening, had already cast their own judgment on the space, their murmured recollections and side glances weaving a narrative of shared disappointment. As the dialogue deepened, the former friend's voice broke with a mixture of regret and longing. "I was blind not only to my own failings, but to the pain I was inflicting on you, the misunderstandings. That was never my intent. I wanted to reach you, to hold on to the promise we made." Her response was equally soft, yet resolute. "I wanted to believe that too, but each betrayal, perceived or real, built a wall around my heart. It wasn't just your silence that hurt. It was the way our family dynamics let that silence echo until it reverberated with such intensity." A single tear slipped down his cheek, as if to wash away the residue of all the broken moments they had shared. In that silent, charged moment, the weight of their mutual pain was momentarily suspended, replaced by the raw possibility of understanding. The atmosphere shifted imperceptibly, a glimmer of reconciliation sparking between them, fragile yet stirring. A family member passing quietly by the doorway offered a knowing nod, as though silently affirming that in the murmur of shared voices and scars, the journey toward healing had already begun. And, amid the echoes of all that was lost and broken, both the former friend and the protagonist felt the faint stirrings of a reluctant hope. It was in this charged, delicate space that the beginnings of reconciliation emerged. Their words, once weapons of old grief, now became tentative bridges to a future where forgiveness might soothe the daily echoes of the past. And while neither of them could promise that the wounds would heal overnight, that moment of shared vulnerability marked the first step towards reclaiming both the trust and the fragile bond they had once desperately yearned to protect. Chapter 3. Breaking Barriers. The atmosphere in the old family parlor was thick with tension and lingering memories that no one in the room could quite seem to shake off. Soft light filtered through heavy drapes, and each family member's face was etched with a mixture of sorrow, anger, and hope. At the center of this emotionally charged meeting sat Serena, her heart pounding with the weight of decades-old pain and the burden of a legacy founded on trust, a trust now fractured by old betrayals and misunderstandings. The discussion began in a measured tone, with voices too cautious and careful for an enemy but too sharp to belong to friends. One by one, older relatives recounted instances when trust had been misplaced, when promises were broken and misunderstandings deepened all wounds. The dialogue was not merely a review of facts, but an opening of hearts, exposing the silent scars that had defined so many moments before this day. Serena listened, each word a reminder of past failings. But as the accusations and regrets were voiced, she began to feel the stirrings of a change, an impulse to bridge what had been broken. Across the table, almost hidden in the shadows that danced with the fading light, sat Naomi, Serena's former friend. Their shared history was layered with joy and betrayal, loyalty intertwined with regret. Naomi's eyes, usually so guarded, now revealed a flicker of vulnerability. The family meeting had inadvertently become the stage for a deeper conversation, one that stretched beyond the heated memories of the past. Unable to remain silent any longer, Serena took a deep breath and addressed the room, her voice soft but imbued with unwavering determination. I know that many of you feel the weight of broken trust and old resentments. I, too, carry those pains every day, she confessed. Her admission was not a plea for pity, but rather an invitation, a call to rebuild on honest ground. Spurred by her honesty, Naomi's gaze wandered from the admiring murmurs of other family members back to Serena. In that glance, years of unresolved tension rested, as if waiting for one brave act to set them free. Later that evening, after the formal part of the meeting had tapered into more subdued, reflective conversations, Serena found herself in the quiet of the overgrown garden outside the house. The night was cool and smooth, and the world seemed momentarily isolated from the conflict inside. She had not planned to seek solitude, yet here she was, the familiar weight in her chest a constant reminder of what had come before. It was then that Naomi too stepped out, drawn by an unspoken need to speak without the watchful eyes of their family. Under the soft glow of a street lamp, the two stood facing each other, their expressions etched with shared regret and cautious hope. Naomi began hesitantly, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "I've been thinking all these years. I've held on to my own resentments. I never fully understood the pain I might have caused, or the battle you were fighting within yourself." Serena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, a mix of relief and sorrow. Answering softly, Serena replied, "I've carried the burden of our past, the misunderstandings, the distance. I was afraid that if we tried to reconcile, we might reopen wounds too deep to mend. But tonight, surrounded by family and truth, I realized that healing can only begin when we face our pain together." The soft night air seemed to hold its breath as Naomi stepped closer. In that instant, the years of hostility melted away, replaced by the warmth of a shared understanding. Their conversation spiraled into a confession of regrets, of dreams deferred and friendship lost to time and circumstance. With every word, the gap between them narrowed until the only thing remaining was raw, honest vulnerability. In a moment that felt suspended in time, Serena reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed against Naomi's. The simple contact spoke volumes of forgiveness and longing. And then, with the night as their silent witness. Their eyes met, and an undeniable truth filled the space between them. Their lips came together in a tender kiss, a kiss that carried the weight of broken promises, the pain of years apart, and the hopeful promise of new beginnings. It was a turning point. This was not merely a physical act of affection, but an emotional reckoning. In that intimate moment, Naomi and Serena acknowledged the pain of their past and embraced the necessity of healing. The kiss was brief yet all-encompassing, a vow to rebuild not only the trust that had once bound their family, but also the bond between them. As the kiss slowly ended, both women pulled back, their eyes glistening with tears and determination. They did not need words to confirm what had already been spoken by their hearts. Everything had changed. That night, under the quiet watch of the stars, Serena and Naomi agreed to become partners in mending the fractures within themselves and their family, recognizing that neither forgiveness nor healing would be instantaneous, but that every step forward was a defiant act of hope. Returning inside together to rejoin a now subdued family conversation, they carried with them a silent pact, a promise to break through the barriers that had long kept them apart, and to forge a new legacy of trust and understanding. Chapter 4. Mending the Fractures. As the pale light of early morning filtered through the tall windows of the old family estate, the air seemed to shimmer with the promise of renewal. With the long-awaited family trust restoration ceremony only days away, every member of the household sensed that this moment was not only about repairing ancestral bonds, but also about healing the internal fractures that had long festered in their hearts. At the center of this delicate undertaking were the two protagonists, Elena and Marcus, whose renewed commitment to one another had become a lighthouse guiding the family through turbulent memories. Their shared past, riddled with misunderstandings and unspoken grievances, had, over time, evolved into a deep understanding between them, a mirror of the gradual repair happening within the larger family unit. Determined to nurture these bonds, they set out on a journey of reconciliation that demanded both vulnerability and resolute determination. The day began in the modest yet warmly lit living room, where family relics commented silently on lost times and unhealed wounds. Eleanor, with a trembling voice lightened with both hope and remorse, initiated the first of a series of heart-to-heart discussions. Sitting down facing her estranged brother, Andrew, she recalled the many times they clashed over trivial matters, only to see echoes of deeper insecurities. "I know our disagreements seemed endless," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, "but I've come to understand that beneath all of that anger was our shared longing to feel safe and loved. I want us to try again." Andrew, whose own heart had been barricaded behind years of resentment, found his defenses slowly softening at her sincere invitation. Their conversation meandered through memories, both bitter and sweet, hinting at the possibility of a future defined by mutual support rather than conflict. Meanwhile, Marcus reached out to their aging father, who had long harbored the quiet pain of abandoned dreams and past mistakes. In the solitude of their garden, where the rustle of leaves composed a gentle hymn, Marcus and his father unraveled the complexities of their strained relationship. It was a raw, unguarded dialogue, a confession of regrets and a pledge to foster better understanding. "I've always admired your strength and your love for us, even if I didn't show it," said Marcus, his hand resting reassuringly on his father's. In that candid moment, years of unspoken longing were distilled into a single meaningful exchange, sowing seeds for forgiveness and the mending of age-old fractures. In quieter moments that interwove through the day, Elena and Marcus collaborated to address the tangible symbols of old wounds, a calendar of sick days, absences at once pivotal family events, and the unhealed gap of trust that had for too long divided the household. They organized an informal meeting in the spacious back room, where the dust of neglect had not yet suffocated the room's warm aura. Together, they patiently listened to stories of old misunderstandings shared by cousins and uncles alike, each narrative a painful reminder of what had been lost and what still could be reclaimed. There was a profound intimacy in these shared memories, a gentle acknowledgement that, though the path was winding, the destination was worth every faltered step. As the day faded into a tender evening, confidence began to creep back into the hearts of the family members. Laughter mingled with tears as each one recounted a memory of when the family had been whole. In the memory-lightened rafters of the old estate, the protagonists discovered that family trust was woven through unguarded vulnerability, small moments of courage in admitting mistakes, transforming sorrow into understanding, and dismantling the barriers that had kept them apart. During a brief lull in the day's activities, Ellen and Marcus shared a quiet moment together in the hushed ambience of the drawing room. They revisited a faded photograph cordoned in the folder of their shared history, a picture of happy faces long dimmed by time, now becoming a testament to their joint renewal. Here, under the soft glow of the living room lamp, they exchanged renewed promises. The intimacy of the moment was not in the words alone, but in the silent vow to face the future as one, acknowledging the pain of the past while embracing the hope of redemption. "We are a work in progress," Elena whispered, her hand tracing the fabric of Marcus' arm as though it were sealing their united commitment to rebuild their family. "And every day we mend just a little bit more." The words resonated deeply, a pledge that bridged the troubled history with the unspoken promise of transformation. By the time the clock chimed the close of the day, the family had embarked on a journey of healing that was as tentative as it was genuine. The conversations had unearthed buried grievances, but they also laid the foundation for sincere forgiveness. The family trust ceremony loomed on the horizon, a symbolic culmination of the day's honest endeavors. Yet, even before that grand gesture, every whispered word, every open admission, and every shared memory had contributed to an ongoing narrative of redemption. In the waning light of twilight, as the protagonists locked eyes with each family member they had so painstakingly engaged with, there was a collective understanding that while the fractures might never fully disappear, they could indeed be mended. With each heartfelt dialogue, each reaffirmed promise, and every smile born out of shared memories, the family pieced together the fragments of their once splintered legacy, proving that true healing is a gradual yet profoundly impactful journey. Chapter 5. New Beginnings, Bittersweet Farewells. Under an overcast sky that hinted at both rain and the promise of clear days, the family gathered in the old courtyard for the trust restoration ceremony. It was an event that had been a long time in the making, a symbolic reunion of hearts and histories now intertwining to form the bedrock of a future once obscured by old wounds. As familiar faces beamed in quiet acknowledgement and tearful smiles, the ceremony unfurled like a carefully rehearsed ritual, each word punctuating the renewed commitment to one another. Grandfather Morneau, with a steady voice softened by age and regret, led the assembly. He recited the family creed, a litany that spoke not only of legacy and honor, but of forgiveness and the willingness to move forward despite the weight of sorrow. In that moment, even the murmurs of the gentle rain seemed to harmonize with the hopeful cadence, as if nature itself was acting as witness to the restoration of bonds once severed. At the heart of this reunion stood Elena and Marco, whose own journey mirrored the healing taking place around them. They exchanged glances filled with unspoken words, an admission that despite the warmth of the gathering, both bore scars that might never fully fade. Elena's delicate fingers trembled slightly as she accepted a symbolic token, a small, intricately carved heart, which represented not only the family's unity, but also the acknowledgement that love, though rekindled, carried its own set of aches and memories. The family trust ceremony concluded with a silent collective promise, to embrace the present with a conscious nod to the past. As the guests began to disperse into the soft drizzle, Elena and Marco found themselves lingering at the edge of the courtyard. Their conversation shifted from the formalities of the ceremony to the more vulnerable terrain of their personal struggles. They spoke about the emotional fissures that had plagued them for years, fractures that no amount of reconciliation could entirely mend. Yet, in that exchange, there was relief as well. To confront familiar pains enabled them to see the possibility of healing, even if the journey was lifelong. In a quiet alcove of the garden, away from the remaining laughter and chatter of family members, Marco allowed himself a moment of introspection. Shadows danced across his face as he recounted memories of times when regret and anger had held him captive. Still, amid these reflections, there was a palpable sense of invitation toward a future where forgiveness was not merely a formality, but an active and engaged pursuit. Elena, equally pensive, recalled nights spent wrestling with her own regrets, the feeling of betrayal intertwined with the yearning for connection. Their exchange was measured, as both acknowledged that the scars from past neglect would forever be part of their interior landscapes. However, they also recognized that these marks did not diminish their capacity to love, they simply testified to the depth of what had been at stake. The night deepened, and cooler air nudged the pair to draw closer. Beneath a modest archway, decorated with garlands of wild rosemary, they paused to reassess the symbiosis of their hearts. With voices softened and eyes glistening with the shared memory of older wounds, Marco remarked that parting with the past did not mean erasing it, but rather learning to live with it without letting it define the future. Elena nodded in agreement, her words coming gently, that every goodbye, however bittersweet, held the promise of new beginnings, for every ending was merely the threshold of a new chapter. In a moment that stretched between farewell and hope, they decided it was time to seal their understanding not only with words, but with an act of deep tenderness. They came together slowly, the sound of their hearts filling the pauses between whispered reflections, and moved into a final embrace. Their lips met in a kiss that was both an apology for what had been lost, and a celebration of what was attainable. It was neither passionate in the reckless sense, nor overly dramatic. Rather, it was a quiet, affirming farewell that allowed them to acknowledge the pain, the beauty, and the resilience born from their shared past. As the kiss lingered, the artful blend of sadness and promise resonated with the storm outside, a storm that was beginning its retreat. In that ephemeral moment, the boundaries between past and future blurred, leaving behind a lingering note of hope punctuated by the echoes of memories. The embrace symbolized closure, not as an absolute end, but as the necessary distancing from old wounds to leave room for growth. Beneath the layered textures of regret and remembrance, each recognized that time might never fully heal all scars, but mutual understanding was a beginning in itself. When the moment finally ebbed, the silence that followed was filled with shared laughter and quiet assurances. They stepped back into the embrace of the family gathering one last time, before parting ways for the evening. A symbolic return to the community that had stood witness to their mending spirits. As they walked separate paths, the final look they exchanged was imbued with the promise of renewed love and the unyielding strength born of mutual acceptance. The legacy of that night, steered by both grief and joy, was clear.